Good day, everybody, and welcome back. So, in this episode, I'm diverting my plans because the Supreme Court Justice died. So, for those of you who haven't been watching the news or not into the political things or whatever, one of the Supreme Court Justices, one of a more liberal bent, has died. And unfortunately, that means that according to current process and procedure, the president gets to choose another Supreme Court justice. And Donald Trump has already had 3 in one term, okay, which is pretty high rate. And in the previous presidency, Supreme Court justice also became controversial as, Barack Obama, over his 2 terms, started to put more and more Supreme Court justices on the bench. The right wing at the end of Obama's second term were like, no, we will not put any more on the bench. You've had too many on the bench. I would not do it. And the people on the left were like, Obama, you get to do it, man. Do it. And Obama's like, nah, I'm good, bro. I think Hillary Clinton's going to win it, and we'll just let the next president decide. The Supreme Court justice. I mean, everyone's saying Hillary Clinton's going to win. What's the worst that could happen? I'm going to do the Babe Ruth. I'm going to call a home run over the thing, and yeah, it's going to go fine. And guess what happened? It didn't go fine. Donald Trump ended up winning, and he took that first seat. And then Thomas, I think it was, retired about midway through this term, and he replaced that one. I think that one was the Kavanaugh one. And I'm going off of memory here. I know Kavanaugh got through in there. I like beer, okay? I like beer, that guy. And then now we're on the third one, because unfortunately, the lady had passed on. So we have 3 Supreme Court justices in one term, and of course, this is causing a sort of a constitutional crisis because, of course, it is. Everything's a constitutional crisis these days. Donald Trump wants a Supreme Court justice pick in there. So that, because he thinks the Supreme Court justice is what decides the presidency over the voters. Apparently, in the year 2000 they did, but that's a whole other can of worms. He thinks it's going to be that close. maybe not. Hopefully not. Get out there and vote, right? Hopefully it's not close. Hopefully it's very decisive, so we don't have to have any more conflicts. But worst comes to worst. But that's just the feelings of people as they are right now. This is the contention. Right now, we're in a really dire straits, America. America's in real dire straits. But what America needs is a supreme makeover. I know you can't change who you are, darling. You can't change the entirety of your person. You got history, you got some laws, okay? But you do have this thing called amendments. Okay, and we're going to do a little makeover for you. We're going to trim off a little bit of the fat. We're going to redevelop some of these processes in a way that'll work out and make things a little less stressful for you. All right? So that's what we're going to do this episode. Before I lose my voice and you doing that voice, oh, Rocco, you're such a darling. You're such a cod. Anyway, before I lose my voice on that, we're going to talk about one of our 8 tenets here for the Reformationist platform of 2022. Though I hope a person in Congress can work this out, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Maybe get this up a little faster and if you can't, then I could go in there and do it for you. Now, point number 5, 1 Supreme Court Justice nomination per presidential term. When I mean nomination, I mean gets nominated. So, because nomination is kind of a process. So basically, you have 9 Supreme Court justices. You got 9 on there. And because you have 9 of those guys on there, basically the 9 is the cap and the 9 is what it is. So basically, if a Supreme Court justice retires or dies or anything else, then the president replaces it so that there's 9 on the bench again. Basically, 9 is the number on the bench. That, by the way, is not in the Constitution. Not in any written law anywhere. Just precedent. It's kind of weird, to me, I don't know, just saying, how numbers like that are just kind of like, sure, 9, let's pick 9. We're good. we're good. 9. Yeah. I mean, could you imagine, like, if, like, the number of years a president was elected was randomized? It's like, roll a dice. Okay, 4. Now, the interesting thing about the presidency, though, is that the term limits of 2 term limits is in the Constitution, but it wasn't at the beginning. That was added in the 1940s, like 1950, 1940, somewhere around there, after World War II, basically. We amended the Constitution to have it so that a president serves 2 terms. And the reason being is because it was a precedent before, just like it's a precedent to have 9 judges on the Supreme Court. And because it's a precedent to have 9 Supreme Court justices, blah, 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 we know that. But it was a precedent for the president. Precedent for the president. Say that 5 times fast. It was a precedent for the president to only serve 2 terms. 2. And it was a precedent because George Washington did that. George Washington's like, yeah, I'm very popular because I helped you guys win this war against, for independence and all that. But I don't want to be this country to be a country of kings. I want it to be a country that acknowledges the need to transition power peacefully to people and to keep it from being a monarchy or from being a, what they call it, a nepotist society where one family rules the entire country, right? And you could see Donald Trump kind of goes against that belief system. And you have to acknowledge that whether you are a Republican or a Democrat. You have to acknowledge that this guy, more than any other guy, has been doing this sort of nepotist thing. Now, one could argue that there's certain social networks of power, like, hey, Obama was president, and hey, now his vice president's trying to become president. Or hey, the wife of the husband is trying to become president, and Miss Clinton and stuff like that. Yeah, those things happen. But here's the thing that people rarely understand is that this anti-nepotism and anti-family power and anti-congressional power is ingrained in our country. And I think Donald Trump underestimates how ingrained it is. In fact, I would actually argue that some of the reason he won that election against Clinton's was because maybe our generation, some of the kids in our generation, like maybe some of the voters, were tired of seeing Bush, Clinton, Bush, Clinton. They were tired of seeing the Bush and Clinton like duopoly, right? Now, they just have to extend it out to the actual parties. But that being said, we're against that kind of thing. So it was a big surprise when Roosevelt, well, not quite, I guess, a surprise. It was more like, oh, somebody ruined that precedent. So Roosevelt, the president famous for his World War II, the day which will live in infamy speech, the one who was there for Pearl Harbor and through World War II, was wheelchair bound. He got a 3rd term. He started a 3rd term. Unfortunately, he didn't live to see the end of it. Right? He died during his 3rd term in office. But after, his passing, the lawmakers were quick to say that precedent that Roosevelt just violated is now a constitutional amendment. Likewise, here in this situation, when it comes to Supreme Court justices, clearly a bound is being stepped, and there's a bipartisan agreement about presidents having too much power in Supreme Court justice picking. And it's too random, it's too chance-based. So, likewise, like that part of history, we have to take this part of history and expand it out. So, the Supreme Court justices, one per presidential term. I had to do all that backlog in history, and I'll timestamp this here in the thing to kind of get you to this point. Basically, the concept of one justice picked per presidential term works like this. Since we have a precedent of 9, we will establish that 9 is the minimum. 9 is the minimum amount of judges that you want to have on the bench, or 9 is what they call the whiplash point. I'll call it. I strike the minimum, say it's a whiplash point. So a president starts his term. There are 9 justices. A justice passes. At that moment, the president nominates a justice. The Senate confirms or denies, etc., etc. Everything else works the same. But that's his one until the end of his term. So 4 years. So one justice gets selected about every 4 years. Next president term comes up. President can pick. If there's still 9 justices, the president has to wait until there's one alleviated. However, if a president starts his term with 9 Supreme Court justices on the bench and basically goes all the way to the end, he gets to his 4th year of his term, and there are still 9 Supreme Court justices on the bench, he gets to nominate one. And they become the 10th justice. Dun da da da, because there's no cap, okay? He becomes a spare. We get a spare justice. He or she, the justice, becomes a spare justice. They get 10. And on top of that, so now that we have 10 justices, now it's like, what happens when we have a tie? What happens if 5 say this and 5 say that? They'll give us high fives. But what we'll say is, at that point, the justice who's been on the bench the least amount of time, their vote gets thrown out in that case. So it's in favor of the 5 eldest judges who picked on one side. So the spare has a problem, right? A spare you can have a 10th justice, but that 10th justice, in the event of a tie, doesn't have power. They'll vote anyway, and they'll vote with or without that. But if there's a tie, their vote doesn't count. Now, let's say that these justices live a long and healthy life, and they go through another presidential term, and the president and the next president, because it's been 2 terms, gets to pick one of his, because, hey, there's more than 9 justices on the bench, so it's the end of his 10th year, so now we have an 11th, and then the tiebreaker rules no longer apply. Same thing with everything, 12, 13, 14, 15, etc. So basically, you start to accumulate, as our life expectancy starts to get longer and longer, you start to accumulate some spare judges. You get 9, you get 10, you get 11. If they don't want to retire. But the beautiful part about it, okay, is that for justices, it allows them to exit or retire without worrying about the political implications. One of the reasons that the notorious RBG, Miss Ginsburg, right, died in office instead of spending time with her friends is because she is left leading, right? And she had to stay in court. She had to stay in her position because she knew if she retired or left the office and left due to her health, she knew that Donald Trump would take advantage of it and try to fill the bench, right? Even though she said before she died, do not fill that seat, please. That is my final parting wish. Do not fill that seat. Well, since when does Donald Trump listen to the ladies? Lady says, no, what? They're rich, you let me get away with it. That kind of nonsense. So we know that he would try to do it anyway. She knew he would try to do it anyway. Otherwise, she would have left the bench, right? Right? So she knows what kind of person Donald Trump was. She knew as soon as she left, he would fill the seat with somebody who would fulfill his agenda, right? As a person who thinks of himself, mostly. And so she stayed until the very end. This new process of selecting a justice and not having a cap allows the Justice Department bench to start to get filled with more people, and then people can go, hey, we have an even amount of justices now. Hey, maybe when the 12th one comes in and someone goes, hey, that person's not so bad. I feel like I can step out now, right? There's 10 Supreme Court justices, and then one of the other 9 goes, you know, this person's not so bad. This person might make some good decisions based on that. I'm going to bow out and then bring it back down to 9, right? So it allows the system of allowing one Supreme Court justice and allowing the spares to accumulate, allows for Supreme Court justices to egress gracefully from their position without being held in bondage due to political fears. Which should be beneficial, because nobody should have to do that. Nobody should have to stay in their position because they feel coerced by political forces, right? That's not freedom, right? That's not freedom. We're about freedom. You want to be able to leave your job without having to worry that the whole world's going to burn, okay? That's the whole thing. You can't have freedom if you can't have that. So that's one of the benefits of the system. The other benefit is obvious. When you limit one Supreme Court justice bench fill per term, when you limit it to this, you make it so that any one president, under the current legal jurisdiction that you can only have 2 terms, can have only up to 2 justices that they nominate in their entire presidential career. And the next president down the line can have 1 or 2. The next president after that, 1 or 2. The next president after that, 1 or 2. Maybe there might be some weird thing that happens one time where one president dies and then the vice president becomes president and then they get a pick. That we won't worry about right now, because that's the nitty gritty. Hey, our forefathers didn't get out all the nitty gritty when they should have, particularly the slavery thing. They should have handled that quicker, but unfortunately they had to pick their battles at the time, and they really should have picked that battle, but eventually we got to picking that battle, and we had those battles, and get over it. Freaking some of you sore losers, we're not having an electric boogaloo 2. I'm seeing to that. No. You don't want war. The entire reason for politics and for policy is to prevent social conflict. So, by the way, if social conflict is occurring, that means politicians are failing at their job. If there is conflict, that means politicians are failing, right? If there is conflict. Now you can, that's my whole premise on it. So, my concept is preventing such things. So, the way you prevent such things is by making it fair. Now, clearly, the Republicans were complaining when Barack Obama was having more than his fair share of nominations. And now, obviously, the left is complaining now that Donald Trump is having more than his fair share of nominations. So, we make it so that both sides are saying, hey, you agree on this, let's put it in the thing. But also, let's consider the ultimatums here. Obviously, the Republicans hold the upper hand in power right now. But let's say, so why would the Republicans want a constitutional amendment that would limit their power, right? Well, first off, right now they hold all the cards. We could say, we can make it as part, hey, you want to pass it? You want to pass a constitutional amendment like this under Trump? Say, hey, Trump, you get to have your third Supreme Court justice, but you have to sign this saying that from now on, after 2021, every presidential term only gets 1 Supreme Court justice. Heck, you could even get a 4th if you win, right? Lead them on a little bit. You can have a 4th one if you win, right? Guaranteed. But you won't get a 5th, you won't get a 6th, you won't get a 7th. But you will definitely get 4 if you win, right? Give them a little sweetness. Add a little sweetness to it, right? Because the world's not going to end tomorrow. The world's not going to end the day after that. And if it does, then I guess I won't have to worry about it anymore. Let's think about the future. Let's think about long term. This system is not sustainable if you're going to have men like Trump taking over a major political party in this country. We're not going to survive stuff like that. We're not going to survive harsh nepotism. We're not going to survive harsh bending the rules to favor the people that you like over other people, right? Our country can't survive something like that. It'll go back to being the thing that our forefathers fought against, right? So we need to think about what short-term sacrifice we can make in order to do it. So saying, hey, Trump, we can give you that 3rd person if you sign this amendment to the Constitution. You'll be famous. People throughout the world, throughout American history, will remember 2020 as the time that Donald Trump signed an amendment to the Constitution of the United States. That doesn't happen every day, man. You can call it the Trump Amendment if you want. Go ahead and do it, man. Sign this. Because, hey, if you win, you'll get a fourth, right? And if you get a third term, which you won't, you could get a fifth. No. No. Like, I don't think any politician would say, let a president be more than 2 terms because they want to be president too. As I said, presidential fetish. But that's the whole thing, right? You gotta get him to sign it, and you do it by presenting it to him and presenting it to his ego, right? It's a historical moment. It's a constitutional amendment. These things are written in the annals of history, right? He'll forever be remembered for that thing he signed, right? So let him sign his own restriction. Let him sign a restriction to himself and the restriction to the future presidential power. And you can even present and say, hey, in the future, if Democrats get the presidency, this will prevent them from doing something that they're talking about on Twitter right now, right? Something like inflating the bench, right? Because basically the tit for tat that the Democrat Party is planning right now is that, well, we're just gonna nominate like as many justices as we want to bleach out the other side, right? And which emphasizes the need for this constitutional amendment more than anything, because some of the Democrats are like, well, then heck with the rules. If you're gonna do this, we're just gonna nominate like 5 Supreme Court justices as soon as we get on there, and then there's going to be, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 on the bench. Right? Let's nominate 13 on the bench. Let's nominate 11 on the bench. Let's get more on the bench, right? They're saying, let's add more to the bench. What's the cap? Nothing. Okay. They're planning that, guys. Come on. So if they're planning that, if you limit it 1 per presidential term, you could at least stop the bleeding. But on the Democrat side, you could say, well, at least you're future thinking, right? Because you think that the world is trending towards democratic viewpoints. So if that's the case, then that means you will have more Supreme Court justices eventually than Republicans will, right? See, you can't see who wins or loses. It's not so easy to see that the left wins this fight or the right wins this fight through this constitutional amendment. What does happen is that it sets a rule that every presidential term only gets 1 Supreme Court justice. And we know that. That's in the Constitution. We know that that's what happens, right? It's as simple as that. And that's the beautiful part about certain things about constitutional amendments is their simplicity. So to me, 1 Supreme Court justice per presidential term is needed as an amendment, and it's needed as soon as possible. So if you guys could get on that would be great. But if you guys don't, then, well, I'm going to take your laziness and I'm going to freaking run for office, and I'm going to write it down and implement it. And you guys can either vote for it or you guys cannot. But you all know that that's the direction that we need to go, and you all know that that's what needs to happen. So I'll leave that to you. But anyways, thank you very much for watching this content. This is what happens when you take furry conventions away from a furry. Okay, this is what happens. They try to tell the government how to do their job, so that way I could get back to going to conventions again. Okay, I want my conventions, dang it! If I have to solve your problems for you, I'll do it. You lazy sacks of crap. I'm working my regular job and doing your job for you at the same time. You're welcome, Congress. Lazy sacks of hoo-ha. Anyways, I'm going to get the hop out of here. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you guys for the next shtick, which will probably be the peaceful transfer of power assurance, because we need to cover that and how we go about doing that. So, because right now, Donald Trump's talking about, well, I'm not going to transfer power peacefully. I'm going to rely on the courts. Okay, let's go that route. Let's make another constitutional amendment to prevent that from happening. See you guys next time.